these are the challenges that we face on a daily basis. And here are some real examples of things that you can do to pattern disrupt, to set yourself up to do again and start moving forward. Have you ever gone down that rabbit hole? You know the one I'm talking about, the one where your mind just spins. You're in this spiral, this circle of these thoughts that may be rational, irrational, or a combination of both, but you can't get yourself out of that. So what do? And it's not just yourself, but what if you're with a group of people or you're in a situation? How do you stop and get yourself back in order? Pattern disruption. Disrupt the pattern. Do something that snaps you out of it and gets you back on track. And we're going to talk about that. And I'm going to tell you a few things that I do that will get you back on track so you can get to what you need to do to finish your day. Let's get into it. So what is pattern disruption? That's exactly what it means, right? You're going along, you're doing something, and all of something out of the blue just comes in and just disrupts everything, right? So I'll give you an example of this. Sometimes when I find myself being in a cycle of like negative thoughts, like maybe I'm going through a challenge, a particular challenge, with a situation, right? I'm dealing with something, a big challenge, either in my business or in my life or something that I'm involved in. And what happens is that, it just is so mind consuming, right? It just consumes my mind all the time. And what happens is that, I go down this rabbit hole of just thinking about all of these things, because remember what we talked about in previous episodes about the subconscious, like, things get stuck on a loop sometimes, and your subconscious is either trying to keep you safe or it's kind of reiterating information that you've taken in and it's trying to push it out, but it can be extremely distracting. So some of the things that I've developed to kind of snap me back into it, I know it's going to sound crazy, is a rubber band. So I've actually put a rubber band on my wrist and I'll snap it. So when my mind is going down this rabbit hole of, all these thoughts that are just flooding in, that's causing me to be distracted, right? During the day when I'm should be focused on the task at hand, I'll just snap it. So what happens? When that happens, it automatically sends a signal to my brain. Yes, the harder I snap, the more pain I feel, or if it's something light, it's just something to disrupt what my mind is focusing on. So if I'm spinning out of control, I need to get back on track. I snap the wrist. It's very simple, doesn't cost a lot of money. It's not some fancy tool. I think you can get rubber bands for like really cheap. I don't know, well under $1. But the concept there is that I'm recognizing that my mind is going down a unproductive path with all this information that's absolutely useless, and I'm snapping it back into place. So there are a lot of times that, I might be dealing with a difficult person and they tend to maybe not mesh well, right? So it frustrates me. So when I'm dealing with them, instead of like being cool, calm, and collective sometimes, I'm going to want to react, right? And the reaction time is something that may be counterintuitive, that's just going to continue it on and on and on. Sometimes it's just better to stay quiet, let them finish, and then redirect. So you could be sitting in a meeting and have a difficult interaction with somebody, and before you're sitting there talking, you could snap your wrist, right, with the rubber band and send that signal to your brain to kind of disrupt that. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to take your mind off of whatever that rabbit hole of spiral out and set yourself back up and tell yourself, okay, this snap is going to stop my brain, right, for that very moment, right, and give me a short reset so I could collect my thoughts and get the right thoughts in my mind. So when they translate to the words that come out of my mouth, that I don't say something that's going to be either offensive or direct or overly aggressive, and I can stay calm throughout that whole entire process. It's not something that's like, it's unique in the sense because it's such a simple thing. It doesn't cost a lot of money, right? You don't have some fancy gadget. You literally have a rubber band. But the power that it gives you to get your subconscious mind back in check in that situation is absolutely priceless. Here's a simple technique that gets you back on track. And the more times you do it, you'll be training that subconscious mind, like we said in previous episodes, right, to not react that way. You're just giving a signal to your brain to allow you to disrupt whatever it is that's causing you all of this confusion, this frustration, this anxiety, this anger, whatever all those emotions are. You can actually do something that simple to basically snap out of it. No pun intended. So let's talk about, other situations. So there are times when you might be in a funk. You hear some news or there's something that happened, right? Like let's say that you put all this hard work in, and man, I remember doing this. I had a deal that I was working on. I was absolutely 100% sure, well, 99% sure that I was going to get it. I thought, I had all the right solutions. I had good feedback, good buy-in, right? And I'd worked really hard on getting this particular prospect a really good solution, right? It was going to be a great deal. And all they had to do was move forward. But for whatever reason, the deal fell out at the end. And that happens sometimes. Man, what a blow. I did everything right. I saved the customer a large sum of money, right? I brought something that was almost to the equivalent of what they were doing now, right? I had all their buy-in, right? I had brought value to the table, and all of a sudden the deal fell apart. So how did that make me feel? I mean, it really was a blow. It was a blow, right? Because I put all this hard work in, and all of a sudden I didn't get to where I wanted to go. So yeah, that's a tough pill to swallow, and sometimes you need to snap out of it. So when I go into situations like that, this is another pattern disruptor that I use. One of my favorite movies is Top Gun Maverick. Love the original Top Gun, but Top Gun Maverick is one of my favorite movies. And all of the scenes where they're heroic, underdog, overcoming adversity, all of the above. What I basically do is I take about 10 minutes of my day, and I'll literally, I own the movie digitally. I'll sit there and I'll fast forward to all those parts, and I'll watch them. And then I'll fast forward to the next scene, and I'll watch that. And then I'll fast forward to, further on down the movie, and I'll watch that. So I'll actually watch all of those scenes that invoke those emotions that make me feel like, you know what, I'm going to get up and I'm going to do this again. Well, it really works. It works for me. It's amazing how that correlation to those scene sequences, watching it for about 10 minutes will absolutely pattern disrupt my mindset of getting kicked in the gut and feeling like I don't want to get back up and push on, because I'm so disappointed that even though I did all of this work, I did everything I was supposed to do, I did the best negotiation possible, and all of that, and all of a sudden the rug got pulled out from underneath me. Unexpected. Don't even know why, right? Don't really understand all of the details of their decision making. But in times like those, right, it's really easy to get down on yourself and get frustrated and just get like, why do I even do this? And get demotivated and discouraged. So what do? I pattern disrupt. I go into something that gets me motivated, gets me excited, brings tears to my eyes, right? The overcoming of all of these things in the movie. It's a great movie, by the way. You should watch it if you haven't seen it. But it's amazing that those scene sequences, when I watch them and fast forward, and it's about a total of 10 minutes of watch time, will actually change my mindset and disrupt whatever all of those negative, self-inflicting garbage thoughts that come into my brain, right, and make me feel a certain way, to turn that around just by watching this sequence of scenes of a movie. It can be something that simple. You don't have to do the exact things that I'm saying that I do. That's what works for me. I'm just trying to give you examples of things that I do, and when I feel like I need a little bit of help, no pun intended, either snapping out of it or getting myself remotivated. And it could be music, it could be reading, you could read a book, you can go out and run. Hey, man, maybe you have a punching bag and you really want to go at it, but you're doing something to disrupt the pattern, right? To reset whatever you need to reset in your head, right? To get you to be able to move forward. Otherwise, what is the alternative? You're just going to sit and spiral and spiral and spiral. You're going to lose sleep. You're not going to have, a good day. We talked about morning routines. Part of a morning routine, like we talked about in the previous episode, is getting yourself set up for the day. But it doesn't mean that you're not going to get curveballs and problems or fires that you're going to have to put out that are going to pop up, right? So how are you going to react to that? When you have a morning routine, my point was that you're setting yourself up to be in that mind frame to have a really good potential outcome. But when you have these situations that become really overwhelming, that get thrown at you, then how are you going to navigate that? How are you going to snap yourself out of it so you can move forward? Because it will happen. Disruptions happen. So you need to disrupt the disruption with pattern disruption. Disrupt the disruption with pattern disruption. Here's another example of this. So I was at the store the other day, and it was really interesting. So this person was buying alcohol, so they needed to show their ID. And it was interesting because he on your cell phone in California, you can actually have a digital license now, right? You have to go through a whole process and you can have a digital license. So he pulls out his cell phone and shows the cashier the digital license. And she says, sorry, we can't accept that. And he goes, well, law enforcement accepts it. And she goes, no, I can't accept that. We don't. And he keeps doubling down. Well, law enforcement accepts it, but you can't. I don't understand. So this is a little bit of a standoff. So what does she do? She calls in a manager who tells him the exact same thing. He repeats the exact same thing. Law enforcement accepts this. Why don't you? They actually get another manager to come in and do this. And finally, at the end of this, and again, this had gone on for like, I don't know, 7 or 8 minutes. And it was really disruptive. And I was standing and I was just waiting in line, just wanting to, obviously move forward. And I was just kind of watching this. And finally, he pulls out his ID out of his wallet, which he had the whole entire time. And they were able to scan it and do what they needed to do. And they ended up leaving. And I could tell that the cashier was frustrated, that she had to call 2 managers to reiterate exactly what she said. So here's a way that she could have probably pattern disrupted that. Okay, this is what I would have done. So what I would have said is like, oh man, yeah, you're right. Isn't that crazy? For the first time, the government is actually able to do something faster than, a private corporation. Or she could have said, yeah, you're right. We should be able to take these things, but our company policy, we're just not there. So, even though I agree with you, we should be able to take it because, the government takes it, law enforcement takes it, it should work, but our systems aren't set up that way. But instead, what she wanted to do was she wanted to get into a contest, right? Because she was right. And she just said, hey, I can't do this. He was right in the fact that law enforcement accepts this digital ID. It's a form of identification that's allowed, like lawfully. But the fact of the matter is that she just wanted to say, I can't do it and move on. And he wanted to double down and understand why. So he wasn't getting what he wanted and she wasn't getting what she wanted. And we just sat there and had to involve all these other people. Not we, but I was just watching this whole thing. And I was thinking to myself, all she had to say was, yeah, I get it. Make a joke, disrupt this standoff, right? Because this was going down, just people were getting upset and frustrated, these 2 people engaging, right? That other people had to get involved. And every single time a new person got involved, it was like they were just pouring a little bit more fuel to the fire, right? Fuel to the fire. So he finally gave up, right? He wanted to move on. He wanted to buy his alcohol and he wanted to leave the store. But the crazy thing about it is that she even said to me, she's like, man, I just don't understand. Why do I have to have 3 people explain it to him? But that wasn't really the problem. The problem is the way that the response was, he was looking for an answer She didn't have an answer other than the fact that, hey, our company doesn't allow it. That's all that needed to be said. And actually, if I remember correctly, the last manager finally said, oh, Bevmo, California or whatever doesn't allow this. Okay? That's it. That's it. But the thing is that it could have been handled in a different way. And if there was a little bit of pattern disruption there, like a joke or something that was just offset, that situation would have went better. So you can also do this in meetings. So maybe you're meeting with someone, maybe for a pitch, or maybe they're meeting with you. Maybe you're doing a job interview. I don't know. There's a number of things that you could be meeting. Maybe you're meeting with a banker, right, to get a loan. And sometimes, situations can kind of get a little bit intense. And when you're in that meeting, sometimes if you're going down a path, like I'll give you an example. There was somebody that was extremely frustrated with the way that one of their benefits was set up in their company. And they kept going down this path of logic, right? So is it logical for this not to be this way? Why can't I do this, right? He didn't want to hear, oh, you can't do this. He wanted to know why. So sometimes what you have to do is people kind of get into this standoff, right? Just like in that cashier versus that customer situation. You have to be able to just disrupt that. So pattern disruption isn't just for you. It may be for a situation. So if you could disrupt that, right, and change kind of the flow of the meeting, right? Whether it's a joke or maybe you pivot to something else that's kind of relatable. So you're not just going, oh, well, hey, let's talk about airplanes right now when he's talking about benefits, right? No, we're not talking about that. But you could say, hey, well, let me tell you a story because, right, there was a situation where somebody tried to do this and man, it didn't work out so well. And it was absolutely crazy. But, we live in a highly regulated state, or this is a highly regulated industry. Whatever it is, you could talk about that. And then all of a sudden they're like, man, you know what? You're right. This is so crazy. This is ridiculous. I don't know why we have to do all these things, right? So instead of sitting there and telling them you can't do something, tell them why, right? And get them down a path to where they're taking ownership, right, of that situation and let them say, oh, yeah, this is ridiculous and this is crap. Because what that essentially does is that just resets the meeting so you can actually talk and solve a problem. It's one of these things that a lot of people don't understand because they think that they have to see that particular interaction all the way through, right? And it's learned behavior. And think about this. So if somebody pushes back on you and you push back, and then they push back on you again and you push back, right? You're constantly escalating the situation, right? Because somebody's not backing down. And, especially in sales or if you're trying to win a debate or an argument, right? What are you trying to do? You're trying to prove your point. But you're not trying to get the other side mad because if they're mad, they're not going to eventually agree with you or buy from you, or you're not going to solve your problem that you're arguing about. So sometimes you need to just disrupt that, give somebody an off ramp, give yourself an off ramp so you could do a reset. Same concept, right? Because if you're going down the rabbit hole in your mindset and you need a reset, and if you're snapping your wrist, right, or you're watching scenes from a movie, whatever that position is, all you're really doing is you're taking something back because at some point, either somebody has to back down, right, which in some cases can be a good thing, but it can also cause animosity, frustration. It could also blow up your deal, right? Where isn't it better to pattern disrupt, get that mindset snapped out of that, whatever that stare down is, right? Of I'm right, you want to be right, we both want to be right, and then let's turn that around and to turn that into something productive by just kind of not changing the subject completely, but just taking it down a different path. And then re-engage, right? And I will say that 9 times out of 10, if you can learn to do that, you're going to diffuse a situation that's uncomfortable, and you're going to be able to have a really good chance of having the outcome that you want. But if you don't understand how to do this, and you want to be the one who's right, and you want to double down and keep pushing, you're not going to win that fight. You're just not. It's not going to work out for you because it's not going to work out for them. You're going to walk away. They're going to walk away. And then they're going to go and say, hey, I didn't really like that person, or I didn't like the way that it went down. And that thing just continues to spiral. So let's talk about it in maybe kind of a different mindset. And this is something that I'd shared early on when I started. I lost my mind in 2020 during the lockdown. It was a really, really difficult time. It was really hard. And, a lot of it was, control, not knowing what was going to happen. The sky is falling. And it was just this continuation of this spiral and spiral and spiral and spiral, right? Didn't want to get out of bed, couldn't sleep. I mean, there was just a number of things that were going through my head at that time. And I needed a pattern disruption because laying in bed the whole entire time and just letting these thoughts continue to permeate over and over and over again was not helping the situation. So I had this one family, we go to church together, and this is one of the kindest things that they did. And it was so kind, but interesting, it was a big pattern disruption. So they own a cattle ranch. So believe it or not, I have never had that experience of working at a cattle ranch or working with cows, right? And when they said, hey, maybe you should come over and we're going to do this very specific thing. And I was like, well, what? Like, well, we have to, document, the mom cattles, right? And the calves, right? Because they've all been released to pasture to eat. And we got to bring them all back. So they're going to bring all these cows back into this pen. And then we're going to see, which calves gravitate, towards the mama cows, right? So we can actually determine, okay, which calf belongs to, which cow. I was like, I don't even know if I want to do this. I could barely like get out of bed. I could barely, just, get dressed and, get ready for the day. But I'm going to go out here and do this. So my son, he drove me out there. And I will tell you, it was one of the best things that could have ever happened. And it was a huge pattern disruption for me, right? It was something that I'd never done before. And what it did, and this is the kindness that they showed me, is that they showed me that I could do something again. So I sat there and I helped. And it blew my mind, if you really think about it, how all these cows would run around and all you had to do is throw your hands up in the air and go, ha, ha, and they would change direction. And I'm like, my gosh, these cows like outweigh me 15-1. Okay? Thousands of pounds. They could just run over me, trample me. I could just be like, there's no way that this animal, right, would, I could not stand head to head, toe to toe, right? It could knock me over just one, right? Let alone like, I don't know, 20 or 30 of them all running at the same time. And by my actions of throwing my hands up and making that sound would get them to turn direction. So a couple of things to really kind of break down there. I did that for a number of hours. I got outside of the house. I got out in the sun and I felt normal again, right? Instead of being in that bed, not getting sleep, letting all those thoughts go through my head, I was focused and concentrated on how am I going to be able to, take care of this cattle ranch situation. Like my part. I've never done this before. I don't even know how to do this. I can't even believe that these cows are even like, taking direction. Like, I mean, indirectly, right? By throwing your hands up. And that time was just absolutely amazing. And I will say that that was probably one of the most pivotal pattern disruptions that I experienced. Because once I went through that process of just getting outside of my normal routine and getting back out there and feeling normal again, I started to feel better. It wasn't instantaneous, but if it was enough of a disruption, an impact to set my trajectory in my mind to a different one. So instead of continuing to go down here, right, all of a sudden, right, I was going here. And by being engaged and doing something that was, yes, manual labor with cows and having absolutely no clue on what I was doing, but I did, right? I did what they told me to do, right? You had people on horses. They were on horses. They were riding. They were rounding up the cows. They were doing all of this. They were documenting, and it was amazing. My son was doing it too. He was right there with me, but it made me feel normal. It made me feel like I accomplished something that I had no idea how to do. But that was one of the biggest kindnesses that family had shown me. And I don't even know if they really understand how much of a difference that one day made. Significant impact, because it was pattern disruption and changing the trajectory of my mind, right? Telling my subconscious that, hey, I need to snap out of this. It's okay. If I could do this one normal thing, right, which again isn't really normal, but man, to them it was, right? If you're raising cattle, this is what you do. But my point is that I went and did something that was different. I got outside, I worked with other people, I interacted with them, and I was able to have a productive day. And the thing that was interesting about that is that in reflecting back on it, looking at how the trajectory changed after that day, was absolutely amazing. Because yes, it wasn't all at once. It wasn't like instantaneous snap out of it, right? Because it doesn't happen that way. But what it did is that change that trajectory where I was able to do more and more stuff and get back out of my head and start being able to do again. So that is what pattern disruption is. Get out of your head so you can do again. Get those negative thoughts, all the crazy thoughts, all the doubts, all of this, the negative aspects of whatever's holding you back from that very next movement. So you don't have to think and spin out so you could do again. That's what you're accomplishing. That's what I'm talking about today. The subconscious mind is powerful. You need to respect it. You need to understand it. You need to be aware of it. So that's why we're doing this series, because I think it's important for all of you that are listening or watching this to understand this, because these are the challenges that we face on a daily basis. And here are some real examples of things that you can do to pattern disrupt, to set yourself up to do again and start moving forward. If you know someone who needs to either watch this episode or hear this episode, share it with them. And I'm going to ask you guys, I want to get as far out as I possibly can. And in order to do that, I need reviews. So if you could just take a moment and rate the show, really appreciate it. Always encourage you to subscribe so you can see the newest drops every single week of the things that we're going to be talking about. I just want to say that this is really something that I'm passionate about, because I think it's really important if I can share some of these experiences that I've gone through where in this journey, right? Because everybody has a different journey, and sometimes it's really difficult. But if you can push through it and find ways to work through some of these challenges and some of these holdups, then that's what this show is all about. You can find us on YouTube at Hey Charles Biz. We're Hey Charles 77 on Instagram and TikTok, Hey Charles on Apple Podcast and Spotify, and Charles Ernst on LinkedIn. See you next time.